Hey guys, welcome back to the UNCOMMODiFiED podcast and to another UNCORK conversation. This is going to be a brilliant conversation, and I'm really excited for it today. My guest today on the show is John Wright. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Tim. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So John and I were reminiscing in preparation for this thing, and you know you're getting old when you say, "I think we met a quarter century ago."
I remember my dad saying things like that, Tim, and I thought, wow, that's crazy. And now here I find myself, I've known that guy for 40
I know
years. And
it.
it's like,
I'm
wow.
like crazy. Like now, I'm apparently we're old, but I haven't figured it out
Yeah.
yet. I don't know if you have, John.
But like a fine wine, we're good.
Yeah.
That's really, we're getting better. We're getting better.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. So let me introduce you, John, to you guys today. So John's the president of leadership development at a company called Eagles Flight. If you don't know this company, you got to check them out. They have been doing world-class work for, I think, over 30 years. I think, John, I think you guys started this
Yeah,
journey a long time
32.
ago. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And you guys have been working with organizations and teams, really driving that leadership development, that culture change, helping them unlock through some really creative learning experiences that you guys have honed and developed over the years. I've had the privilege of participating in one myself many, many years ago. And you guys have just really cracked the code on that experiential based learning and engagement, and are doing it obviously at a world class level. When did you get involved at World Eagles Flight?
Well, I got involved actually even before the company was started. So, I mean, this will be part of my larger sort of story here, Tim. But uh, there was a group of friends, and I actually got involved with the founder of Eagles Flight. He was a mentor. He offered me a mentor relationship when I was 17 years old,
Wow.
and then about 5 years later, when I was graduating, or actually probably maybe a little bit more, that Eagles Flight was starting, and he offered me a job. And so I'm now in my 30th year at Eagles Flight. So pretty much since inception, we started in '88, and I'm kind of actually, I guess, in my 31st year. So it's been quite a ride, and being part of that whole journey really since our founding. So it's been kind of pretty exciting.
That's amazing. And on that side, I mean, just statistically, there are some interesting stats, and you'll know these stats, but my listeners won't. So I'll give them to 50% of Fortune 500 companies over the years have worked with you guys. You've done work in 25 languages, 35 countries around the world plus, and received 20 or more international awards for the kind of work you do. So a world class, amazing organization. And that tips us, I guess, into Phil's original book in some ways, because it was about world class leadership. I think his original work was around this idea of
Yeah.
being a world class leader. And I know that book has had a tremendous impact on me personally over the years, countless others that I've encountered. Obviously, there's been lots of that added to the repository, and we could have a whole nother conversation on that whole journey. But again, if you don't know this company, and I'll be surprised if you don't, but if you're listening right now in a country and they haven't got there yet, you need to get them there. Now, they may not fly and see you there personally today because we're still in the middle of COVID, but I think you can engage people quite well virtually these days, can't you, John?
Absolutely. This has been an amazing year, Tim, of learning how to pivot. I think many organizations have had to do that. And so we've created 25 brand new activities. So it allows us to maintain our activity-based learning kind of focus. And we've revamped about 25 leadership programs to be able to take everything that we have, customer service, diversity, equity, inclusion, all that stuff into the virtual space and be very experiential. So it's been an amazing year. It's been kind of like being in a startup company, but just yesterday, as an example, I did a senior executive group. I had two guys from Norway, one guy from Toronto, one guy from New York, two folks from Toronto. I had someone from Seattle, and someone from the Western Canada. So it was actually pretty amazing, which we have never been able to do that before without it taking, 3 or 4 days of travel and a
Yeah.
lot of money. So this was wonderful, and it was unbelievably engaging, unbelievably experiential, and really powerful for all of us. So I
That,
really enjoyed it.
That's phenomenal. Well, listen, as my listeners know, all good conversations, from my opinion, begin with a drink. Now, sometimes it's a scotch, sometimes it's a glass of wine. Today, we're recording this in the middle of the afternoon in a work week, and so out of respect to ourselves and the people that we work with, we've decided to crack our conversation off with a different type of drink today. John, what are we going to drink together?
Well, we got some Starbucks tea here, and one of my favorites, Tim, is actually their mint green tea. So it's really I love it. So there we
There you
go.
go. We got a mint
Cheers.
green tea, and I'm an orange pico kind of guy. I'm not didn't get the Starbucks, so I made it myself before I came down to my studio. So we got some tea going
Well,
on.
I didn't get there either. I made it in the basement. I
Oh,
got
fair enough.
some of those tea bags for Christmas, so
There
that's
you
nice.
go.
But it's my
Christmas
favorite,
gift.
one of my favorites.
Beautiful. Okay, listen, let's tuck into the conversation, John. So we had chatted about the subject matter that we want to really park on, and it's a passion of yours. I know it's something that you've been involved with, both on the ground doing and thinking about for many years, catalyzing leaders' attention about their grand opportunity to call out their people's potential, to call it forward, to call them into their own sense of destiny, the positive futures that are before them, which is a real powerful opportunity for leaders. And so that's the subject we want to really wrestle out and braille into today. So I want to start with this. So that particular area, why are you so personally passionate about those ideas and that opportunity for leaders and for yourself?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, Tim, and I may missed up a little bit here in this journey, so hopefully that's okay. But I would say, Tim, it comes out of my lived experience. So the gentleman I work for now, his name is Phil Geldart, and when I was 17, he said, we had a mutual relationship. We went to the same church, but he was a senior HR leader at Nestle at the time, and he said, "Listen, I see a lot of kind of leadership potential and gifting on you. Would you be interested in a mentorship relationship?" And I was like, "Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I would be." And so here we are, literally, 40 years later, in this relationship. And over that journey, he has, seen things in me, and he's really called forward my potential. I would say I would not be the man that I am today, the leader I am today, the business leader that I am today, without his support. And he, along that journey, helped introduce me to some other folks within that. When I went to university, he introduced me to a guy who kind of was a colleague in arms of his that shared a similar passion. And that man really spent 4 years while I was in university building into my life, and a number of others along my life journey. But that has literally transformed who I am. And as a result of my experience, he also, Phil is the he, Phil also, I think, encouraged me to say, listen, you also, like, that's part of your job as a leader. So I've got, several folks over the course of time that's been something that I have had the privilege of journeying with them. And there's a couple guys that I work with at Eagles Flight who, one guy, his name is Bob, and Bob was a camper of mine when I was 18 years old. So as Phil started to build into me, I in turn said, okay, I guess this is what any leader should do. And I started to. Bob was 13 at the time. I just go watch his baseball games and encourage him. And here we are, uh, you know, again 40 years later, and his parents are friends. His wife works with us. His kids, and it's just really been cool. And another young man, Matt, he's been part of. He actually was a. I needed a driver for a year in a really busy time, and he started at 26. He was a driver, would drive me back and forth to Toronto, and And here he is now, unbelievably successful, and he's also part of a team that I work with. And so that my lived experience, Tim, then has translated into something that we also, I think, is part of every leader's job, if you will, or every leader's role. Maybe that's a better term. In that, whether you're leading thousands of people in a large organization, your people are your greatest resource, right? We see that posted
Mhm.
all over the place. And yet we've got to actually then take the time to call that potential forward out of people. And so I guess, again, it's all been out of my lived experience that it makes all the difference in the lives of people. And if we, in whatever sphere of leadership we're in, whether it's our children or whether it's our neighborhood or whether it's our church or whatever it may be, that especially as business leaders, when we are passionate about calling forward that potential of people, about encouraging them, strengthening them, equipping them to be who they were designed to be, then we make a huge impact on our organizations, but more so in the lives of people in their families. And so that's, I guess, the reason, the source for my passion about that.
It's and that's interesting because it's coming out of your experience, your life experience, what's happened for you, and you have a desire to do it for others. So let me ask you, I mean, when you think about this idea of seeing potential in people or and
Yeah.
seeing something in them, whether it's their destiny or the sense of who you, I guess, see them could be becoming based on your experience with them, is that is that a gift in and of itself to be able to do that as a leader? Is something that I can learn to do? Or do I need to
Yeah,
inherently have a gift to see it?
my deep conviction, Tim, is it's a learned thing. I mean, I think maybe some personality styles may be more inclined towards it, perhaps. However, in my experience, it's something that you learn, you catch a vision for. You know how they say fire kindles fire. So
Hmm.
when you can be around people who sort of share that ideology, perhaps philosophy, then fire kindles fire. And as you then see um, the difference that it makes in the lives of people, you and I'm, we were chatting. We're now gray hair and so on. So I now have, you know give or take, 35, 36 years of trying to do it myself, right? And I say trying to do it myself, but learning to do it myself, I guess, is the better word. And so now I have that 35 years, and there's just tons and tons of people, tons of leaders that I've worked with in organizations where I see the fruit, right? And one of the gentlemen that I work with, who's at a fairly large organization. He's journeyed with me in this philosophy, if you will, um, for well over 20 years, and he's in his fourth organization where he brings Eagles Flight in, and the fruit in his organizational career is amazing because he learned how to do it. Now he was a hockey coach, so and he's a head of HR, so maybe he has a little bit of an inclination towards people. But he's learned to do that, and he casts that vision in all the different organizations and has done tremendous leadership development to cultivate a whole leadership philosophy and a whole leadership skill set within the organizations that he's worked with. So I've seen it work, and I believe firmly that you can learn it because
Huh.
I think it's just a set of skills that is fueled perhaps by a passion, but the passion grows as you see the impact of having that kind of heart and spending your time doing that kind of thing.
Interesting, John, as you mentioned that, you see it. The image that comes to my mind, I think about what Michelangelo said when asked about, obviously a master sculptor, painter, all these things, but when asked, about the statue of David that he carved, and this could be folklore, it could be truth, but I'll take it to be truth. When asked how did he do it, how did he find it, he's referenced to say that I went into the quarry and I found the rock and I saw David in him and I chiseled to set him free. which is a really
Yeah, it's not amazing.
powerful idea. And as you talk, that's sort of, I guess, what I'm seeing. It's like we encounter people in their, maybe in their rough state sometimes, in rough
Yeah,
state, not rough in the sense they're rough ruffians, but they're rough. They're not formed. They're not fully developed, or they're finding themselves.
exactly. Yeah,
And I've often thought of that analogy that the rock doesn't have perspective on itself. It doesn't know what to chip away. Like, so this master sculptor
exactly.
looks at this rock and says, look, if we just hone this, if we just shape this, if we just take this piece off, like this behavior, if you eliminate this thing, we chisel to set this free. It's a similar process almost.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's two parts to it. There's the chiseling off some of those rough edges or the things that need to be, but there's also the encouraging of the things that are gifts,
Mm,
right? Oftentimes, many years ago, my wife and I read a book on parenting, and when one of the things that stuck with us is that every child has a gift and every gift has a shadow. So,
mm.
our middle son is just unbelievably passionate about whatever he is passionate about. And as a young,
It's it's my
at
dog
least it's
barking.
not my
So
dog. So there we
it's my
go.
dog barking. Somebody just rang the doorbell, and this never happens.
No
But anyway,
problem.
somebody
But
is. They'll
you
post
know,
they'll post produce it out, or we'll leave it in for fun because
okay,
Jackson's like famous. He on
yeah,
my
keep
podcast.
it in for fun. Keep it in for fun. But
Uh,
no, where was I
you're
actually?
you're talking about your
The
son. I apologize.
Yeah, yeah. So there's the shadow and the gift, right? So when he was, in his terrible twos, as they call them, he was just intense. And we said our daughter, we had just only two kids at the time. We now have three, but our daughter had a strong will. Our son had an iron will. But as we started to think about this and this idea of the gift and the shadow, what we see in Jackson is while, as parents trying to shape a young life, there was elements where his iron will was hard to deal with, right? But his that same iron will was brought into to passion, right? And so we had to then call that forward because the gift of that shadow is he's a trailblazer. He's
Yeah,
courageous. He's willing to head into things.
yeah.
So part of a leader's role, a parent's role, is not just chipping away the rough sides, but calling forward and refining the strength to make it real strength and not
Mm.
a hindrance to people.
John, first of all, I mean, what I love, and people won't see it maybe if they don't watch the video or they maybe hear it, but just to see the emotion on your face, and clearly as you talk about your son and this experience, first of all, that just is so powerful to me. So I just want to acknowledge it. First of all, that is powerful because again, there's this powerful thing happening. And as you describe that, I think about my own daughter, who I would have described the same way. My daughter, was challenging to parent, and if I did raise my voice to her, she'd just raise her voice back, and that's just the way it was. But I tell you something, as a 31-year-old woman now working in a corporate environment, the other day is an example where the corporation was instituting a large scale process change, which she felt was not helpful to her and her department. No one was really
Yeah,
speaking up, and they had a meeting, and the AVP of the division was presenting this thing, how wonderful it was. She respectfully contacted him after the meeting, didn't want to do it but basically said, I think you're missing some things here because it's not as
yeah,
wonderful as you think. He set up a meeting with her. She began a dialogue with him. Again, that's the power of the iron will, because if you're weak, you're
yeah,
not going to stand up and put your hand up in a big corporation and say, hey, I know you guys think this is the most amazing process change ever, but I actually think it's not. And that kind
yes.
of chutzpah is what you need. But if so, you can't kill it all, but it gets refined and it gets mentored and all that stuff. So
Yeah,
as you share that, I feel the same way.
because as a young person, the if you don't fit because you rocked the boat in school or something, they can squash that gift,
Mm-hmm.
right? and or it can be squashed by for many different ways. So I think if we have this heart and these eyes to try to see those gifts and call them forward and
Mhm.
help shape them and refine them, then we make a contribution to society, because now we have, these great people. And I mean, Phil did that for me. As a I learned a lot of my leadership skills at camp, right? So at camp, it's all about being loud and passionate and intense and so on. And he's like, whoa, okay, that's really good. If you're doing a 200-person facilitation, but, you got to get some more tools in your tool belt in order to be able to do that. And he refined, he said, okay, the passion and the intensity is great, but you need to add to that. You need to shape that. You need to use it differently. And that was a tremendous gift to me. And it's made me uh, much more of the man, more successful today. That if I hadn't had that, it could have easily got squashed.
It's powerful. So listen, if you guys, as listeners, as you're listening today, I just want to park here for a second because the most important thing for me, as if you choose to give us time and listen to the Uncommodified podcast, isn't that you listen. It's that you challenge yourself to apply and to challenge yourself to ask, what does this mean to me in my real world? So I just want to park here for a second. So whether it's in your child or whether it's in your spouse or a family member, or whether it's in somebody who works for you, somebody who works with you in a volunteer organization, whoever it is, here's a great question. What is the gift? What is the shadow? How are we nurturing the gift? How are we chiseling to help set it free? How are we helping
Yeah.
people see what they can't see in themselves? I mean, that's the challenge in this conversation. Whether you're the CEO of a multinational corporation, or whether you're a stay-at-home dad, it doesn't matter. The question is, are we contributing to the calling forth of the embryonic destiny, the things that are within people, in their DNA, in their natures? Are we calling it forth for the good of themselves and others? I mean, that's the challenge I'm hearing, John, from you as you talk. And what a unique privilege, and what a delicate balance if we're not careful. Because again,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
have to honor that gift, but yet we recognize we have the privilege maybe of, as the old proverb says, as iron sharpens iron, one man or
Yeah.
one woman sharpens another. It's the collision of our lives that creates it.
Correct. Yeah. 100%, Tim. 100%.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So,
Yeah. And
so
I
how do you,
agree with
yeah,
that
how do you
because
help me understand this? Help me understand this as a leader. Like, if I want to do this better,
yeah.
what do I need to start doing or stop doing if I'm going to do this better?
Yeah. So let me do a brief illustration and then kind of go into that, because so just and those of you who are listening, I want you to think of the worst leader that you ever worked for, and just think of yourself. You've got education, you've got ideas, you've got passion, you've got commitment, you've got energy, you've got all these things that you are willing to give to the organization, and not just willing, you want to give them, you want to contribute, you want to make a difference, you want to help the organization be successful. And so now you're working for this worst leader. And I want to think, if you have all that potential in you, think on a scale of 1 to 10 under that person's leadership. Uh, how much of what you had to offer were you able to actually offer under that person's leadership? So again, just give that a number. You don't have to say it out
Mm-hmm.
loud, but between 1 and 10. Okay, you got that? All right. So now think of the best leader that you ever worked for. And again, you've got passion, you've got ideas, you've got education, you've got skill, you've got experience, you've got a desire to support that organization and help it be successful. Now think of how much of what you had to contribute were you able to contribute under that person's leadership.
Hmm.
So now you got two numbers. So I would like you to subtract the the worst leader from the best leader, and what's the difference? So we'll just do this with you, Tim. Leader, those at home can do that themselves. What's your number?
There's at least a 60% difference in
Okay,
my
so
numbers.
think about that. And I do this a lot. Ask this question, and I typically get at somewhere between 40 and 60%. And I get some people obviously at 90%. Like they're like, that was a few years from hell, let me tell you that. And then I get a few people who are like 10 or 20%. But on average, that is between 40 and 60%. So now imagine you're a senior leader at an organization of, let's just do a range here of 100 people, and 60% of those 100 people is getting lost, right? Or let's say you're at a 5,000, 10,000 person organization. The way that leaders can call forward that potential and really bring that value, because that is 60% of the value that you could have contributed was lost to the organization. And if you multiply that over a large organization, it becomes tons and tons of things, which reflects itself in their discretionary effort, right? The way they think about problems, the amount of tenacity they will put towards challenges, the way that they work to interact, that like your daughter, their willingness to go and have some of those challenging conversations. Because if she thought she was going to get shut down, strong will or no strong will, if that guy goes, well, thank you very much, you're not allowed to talk to me like that, then they lose the potential value. So therefore, to me, that kind of is why that is so important. So as you see that, then the way that you stop things that you start doing, I'll start with the stop. You got to stop focusing on task, because oftentimes as we make our progression through from a senior manager up to a more senior executive level, we have to switch from spending so much time on task, right? Or technical expertise, because typically in our early years, we get promoted because we're a really good engineer, or we're a really good problem solver, or we're a really good speaker, or we're a really good accountant, or a really good salesperson, whatever it is. But as we get older, now we get people. So we often promote the best doer, right? The best technician to be the leader of people. But if we don't cultivate those leader skills and those people oriented skills, that heart to call forward the potential of people, we then continue to focus on the technical ideas and not on calling forward the potential of our people. So the first thing we have to stop doing, and this doesn't mean eliminate 100%, but this means we got to stop shifting our primary focus on task and technical and start transferring our focus onto people. And therefore that really now is partly manifested in our time management, right? Because it's like, all right, how much time do we spend with our direct reports? How much time do we allocate within our organization to the training and development of people? How much of our budget in our organizations do we spend on training and developing our people? Because if we believe that calling forward the potential of people is actually a ticket to greatness in the organization, and we often, I think we see this, because the competitive advantage is not the, at times it is the product or the good or service that we have, but often it's the way what we do with that, right? And so we stop focusing on task and technical ability, and we start focusing our energy on people and strategy and inclusion. Because as people are included in those discussions on strategy, we begin to hear their ideas, and then as we give them, we empower them to begin to bring their talent to bear within the organization. Then all of a sudden we're getting huge value from them, and they feel better, they feel excited, they're contributing, they have energy, they go home and they talk to their partner and they say, wow, like I get to be involved in this project and that project, and my boss asked me to do this, and the CEO said well done for that, and they said, listen, I can go play. Like those are the things that begin to happen. So again, the start and
Yeah.
stop are stop
Yeah.
focusing on task and technical and start focusing on people and strategy.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, and it's brilliantly simple, but it, as
Yeah,
you said, though, it assaults identity, because it's the
yeah,
crossing the Rubicon from being the expert to expert in the task, to being the to be the to be a novice people leader in the beginning. That's a hard Rubicon, because you go from this place of superiority of expertise, and that is very much
yes,
shaping your identity. And the moment you take that new job where you cross the Rubicon, you are now you've gone from expert to novice. The thing is you
yeah,
don't know people. Process. I mean,
yeah.
once
And
you
you
set it
want
in
to go back.
place, it doesn't
You
move.
want to go back and go. That's right. You want to go back, Tim. You want to go back. Say, I was amazing there. I knew everything, and now I got people complaining that I don't listen, or or I'm this, or I'm that, and it's kind of frustrating for a while, right?
Hmm.
Because you're not as good as you were as a technical person. I was
Yeah.
chatting with a bunch of engineers about creating a collaborative culture the other day, and they were like, "Buddy, we're engineers. Like, this is you are like blowing our minds because we got to think really differently than the way we think right now." It was funny. So we had a good chuckle about it. But what you just said, that's not easy to cross that
No,
Rubicon. It is just
no,
not
no,
easy at
it's
all.
not. It's not. The other thing I was thinking about as you're talking, we're using this scale of, and you go plus minus on that scale. What I'm thinking about too is that, you're not, this isn't just addition and subtraction. This is multiplication and division. These are
Yeah, yeah,
higher leveraged activities. So I don't just get a plus advantage or a negative advantage. I get a multiplier division when I tend to these things, and when I call forth the destinies or the gifts that lie within people, and I allow a place where they can be ignited and fostered and grow. There is a multiplication that happens within their soul, ultimately first,
yeah,
and then in the soul and heart of our families, or of our community groups, or of our spiritual groups, or of our corporations, or whatever it is. It becomes this multiplying factor as we are able to do this. Now, here's my question as we do this.
yeah,
So, if I see something in somebody, if I see a gift in somebody, whether it's my
yeah,
children or my friends or somebody that works for me or whatever, if I want to start calling it out and cultivating it more and help them see it, probably that's the first thing they need to see it, because someday they don't always see it. But do I do I tell them, like, do I do this behind the scenes? Do I find the gift and try to help them with it, but not really tell them what I'm doing, or do I call it out, and do I articulate it, and then do I frame it in a very practical way, or do I do it more in a mystical behind the scenes way? What do I do?
yeah. Great question, Tim. Great question. In my opinion, you start in a very practical way, and that really just starts with recognition and affirmation.
Mm.
So there's there's a great story of the former CEO of Pepsi, and she did an amazing thing. She actually would write notes to the parents of her direct reports, and just tell the parents the great things that she saw in their children and what they were doing, which I think is amazing.
Wow.
But when you think of just this whole idea of everyday recognition, because it does depend on the role that you are in that person's life, right? So if someone, for example, is in a different function, but they work within your organization and you may not have direct leadership over them, then I think it really starts with affirmation and recognition, where you go and you say, "Listen, that presentation you gave, that was really good. You have you have a tremendous gift with being able to take data and make it understandable for the average person. You really need to cultivate on that." And then I think you recognize and affirm that person to their boss, right? You say, Tim, Matt that works for you, like you did a really great job of helping him present uh, the other day, and well done, Tim. That was great. And I don't know whether you noticed, but he's got a tremendous gift with being able to make the complex simple, and you should cultivate that. I'd be happy to support you or him in that, if that made any sense. But you start very simply with that. Now, maybe if you're that person's direct boss, you say, "Listen, you are really good," and you maybe recognize, say, "Oh, Michelle, you are fantastic at really being able to interact with people. You just build rapport so easily, and I'd like to spend some time and see where this may take you in the organization. So if you're open to that, maybe we could have breakfast, or maybe we could book some time and just chat about that," right? So it depends a little bit on what your relationship is with that person. But in my judgment, you definitely feel free to call it forward, because who doesn't like to hear some
Hmm.
words of affirmation, right? An
Yeah.
attaboy, as a couple of my
Yeah.
friends like to call it. We all like an attaboy, an attagirl. We all like that. So you start with that, you recognize it, you affirm it, and then depending on the relationship, you see where it goes.
Oh, that's powerful. I have this sense when you're talking. I see like a balloon, and it's sort of like it's not quite inflated. And I see what you're talking about. This affirmation is just breathing that, that breath, that pneuma,
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
breathe, and then it starts to expand this thing, which is in them, has a potential shape. I mean, I have some
Yeah.
grandkids now, and we love that the summer we go to the cottage. They love to get Papa with water balloons. And water balloons are pretty fun stuff. You can do a lot of stuff with them, but when you get them out of the bag, they're a little limp and they're not really exciting. But you fill them with something, whether it's water or air, and all of a sudden they fulfill their destiny. They take their shape, and
Yes.
sometimes they're long and thin, and sometimes they're the big fat ones, and you can blow in the long and thin one, and you're never going to make it a big fat one, but that breath will allow it to expand to its destiny, to the shape it was meant to be when it was fully
Exactly.
inflated with whatever this thing
Yes.
is. And that's sort of the thing I'm thinking. Like, that's how I see it when
Yeah.
when you describe it, John.
Wonderful analogy. Wonderful analogy, Tim. Yeah.
Really
Very good.
powerful,
I agree
really powerful.
100%. Yeah.
Man, so listen, if you're listening today, I mean, please look around yourself. What a privilege we have to look around at people and not be always focused on what they can't do or aren't doing, but what is it that they're great at, fundamentally great at? And how do we be that agent within them? Maybe we're the first person ever who's called that out in them and said, "Hey, I see this." Maybe no one's ever done that for them in the past. Whether it's a friend you have that you see something in them, you see potential, and you're speaking life into that thing, and all of a sudden it ignites something. I mean, again, we can use that oxygen analogy. We light them on fire by
Yeah.
introducing some oxygen into their life. This conversation is a pregnant conversation for all of us, because what a privilege to do that for another human being. What a privilege, whether an
Yeah.
organization or
I agree.
family. I mean, you're striking a great chord with me, John. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I also think just saying thank you to people,
Ah,
right? Like thank you for taking the time to prepare that. Thank you for taking the time to answer my email so thoroughly. Thank
mm,
you for taking the time to get back to me in a timely fashion, right? All of those things are those that affirmation starting that's breathing that air into that balloon. And as you breathe that air, that hopefully then builds rapport, and out of that builds rapport, you can just offer to spend some more time together, or maybe that happens by virtue of the way that you go about executing your business day in and day out, and that constant affirmation coaching, and then you can begin to say, listen, what would you like to cultivate in yourself? And
mm.
there's a lot of things that maybe you can help, maybe you can put people in touch with, or get them some training, get them some education, pay for something, who knows, right? There's a lot of things that can flow out of that.
Yeah, my mind's just exploding right now with thoughts about people around me right now, and I'm just saying, you know what? I need to be that guy for them. I need to be that guy for that person in my life, whether it's in the corporate worlds I live in, or work in the customers I work with, or friends or family. I'm starting to just see people in my mind and saying, and maybe, John, maybe what keeps me back is maybe I assume someone else has done it or is doing it. Maybe I excuse myself because I'm thinking, well, I'm sure someone's seen it and already called it out. What do they need me to do that? And maybe I sort of excuse my responsibility, if I have any in that, because I assume somebody else has surely seen it and done it already. Maybe that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, Tim. And sometimes I think we just see ourselves as nothing special,
Hmm.
right? We just see ourselves as we're just a couple of guys, right? And we do what we do. We like it. We may not be particularly exceptional at it, but that's not really true, right? If I think back to when I was, 17 or 18, anybody that gave me affirmation, that was a big deal. And people that were older and more experienced, and in my mind more successful, um, if they offered to spend some time with me, or even if they just said I was good at something like that, I was like, really? And so I think often we just see ourselves, and often we see ourselves full of flaws, right? We see what
Hmm.
we're not. We see those things that still need to be chiseled off of us, and kind of trying to shift our perspective that regardless of whether we still have lots of stuff to be chiseled off, we have walked a lot of miles, and there's a few things. And let's start by trying to see those things. Excuse me.
That's no
let's
problem.
let's start by
That's
trying
somebody.
to
Hey,
see those
that's
things.
somebody calling you because they want to give you affirmation, John.
That's right. That's right.
Uh,
Let's start by seeing the good in people and affirming it, and then we begin to and say, listen, do more of what you're doing,
hmm.
right? And as we continue down that journey, opportunity finds its way, right? So start small, start with the affirmation, start with the encouragement, start with the seeing what you see, and then move forward into some of the other, because it can doesn't have to be that complicated.
No, you know what, and it's so true. And listen, for sake of time, I mean, first of all, those of you listening, thanks for this gift, but I can't say this enough. What are you going to do with this conversation in your life? If you don't do anything with it, you just you just wasted. By the end of this time, you might, if you listen through the whole thing, you're going to waste 45 minutes of your time you're never going to get back. So, may I suggest that you catalyze on the investment of your time by action, because listening's great, thinking is good too, but where the rubber meets the road is when our hand hits the paper to write a letter of appreciation to the parents of the people who work for us. That's where the rubber meets the road. Where the rubber meets the road is where you articulate and you call out so people can hear it. And so listen, John, as we wrap up today, and brilliant conversation, hopefully it's the first of many. Maybe we can have other conversations, because you've got so much more that you could contribute to my audience. And so I hope we get the chance to do this again. Really, really appreciate the gift of your time today, John. It's a real pleasure. So listen, as
Oh,
you
I
look
love
at this, and I think about my podcast, I mean, I call my podcast the UNCOMMODiFiED podcast because it goes back to what you said earlier. We we don't we don't have a lot of special products and services that we sell. We sell a lot of the similar companies sell a lot of the similar things. Organizations
yeah.
trade in similar services, transactions, and the reality is a lot of that is a commodity at some level. You can get it somewhere else. What isn't a commodity, hopefully at the end of the day, is people, but sometimes we become commodities as well. And so my question that I always want to ask when I have the privilege of sitting in front of somebody like yourself is, so John, when you look at yourself, John Wright at his most uncommodified best, when he's not a dime a dozen kind of person, when he's not just like every other, leader of a company or trainer or facilitator or coach, what are you doing that is bringing that unique sense of who you are, releasing the gift that John Wright is? What do you look like when you're doing that?
That's a great question. I think what I look like is a difference maker, right?
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is, I think everybody can make a difference in the lives of people. That's what I believe in my heart of hearts. And so my difference making talent isn't, I'm not an inventor of uh, you know technology. I am not an architect. I am not a, those are not my gifts, right? My gifts tend to come in the area of people, but that's been something that has been a learned gift as well, right? I think I had compassion for people naturally, and I think over my lifetime I have been able to cultivate that idea of saying, how can I, through support and encouragement, really begin to make a difference in the lives of this individual, this leader, or this organization. And by bringing those tools that I have to bear, I think in our training side we bring fun, innovative things, but it's the part behind it, right? What people say is, okay, this, like you said, it's the messages are similar, but the passion that you bring it forward with, the true belief that it works, the examples from putting it into practice, because I also feel I have to be really congruent. If I'm going to talk to you and say that, growing your people or calling forward the potential of people is important, I need to do it, and not just did it once or twice, but keep doing it. And so it's something that I'm constantly looking for. How can I make a difference in the life of someone? How can I affirm them? How can I see that spark in them and encourage it? And it doesn't matter whether I'm going through the the checkout line at the grocery store and I say, hey, you know what, you were really efficient today, or I say, you were just really nice, thank you, I appreciate that you looked at me, you make conversation, you're really good at what you do. Those kinds of things. uh, I think when I'm at my best, I'm a difference maker, and I'm comfortable in my own skin, like you talked about. I'm comfortable to see that and call it forward and affirm it in a super simple way. And I'm comfortable to be willing to take a risk if there's something bigger or more significant, where I can invite people into a friendship, a meal, something like that, to spend a little bit more time cultivating that.
And you know what, and again, those of you listening may not know John, or some might know John well. Some might you might not know John at all. I know from my experience with John over the years, which has been at some distance, to be frank, but I know that this is true of John. John uncommodifies himself, and frankly, I think that's why you found your destiny at Eagles Flight, because that's what you guys have been doing as a group. Now, my proposition is Eagles Flight isn't uncommodifying itself, because Eagles Flight is just a brand. It's the people at Eagles Flight that are uncommodifying this
Yeah.
experience with their clients for their benefit. You uncommodify the experience, but you have to uncommodify yourself to deliver that extraordinary experience. And that's the one thing I know that you guys do at the highest level, but with for the highest purpose and the right reasons. Yes, you've made some
Yes.
money along the way. Yes, you've developed a great business. Yes, it has to be sustainable through profit, but it's much more than that for you, John, and for Eagles Flight. And I know that. And that's what just deeply impresses me about you and the people that you partner with. And so I want to thank you again. Now, as we finish, I want to give you a last opportunity. And I'll shape it this way. What encouragement or challenge would you want to give our listeners as we finish up from John Wright to them today, that they should be mindful and thoughtful about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's along the same theme, Tim, and that is believe you can make a difference in people's lives, right? That your affirmation, your word of encouragement, your eyes to see something unique in them, your willingness to tell them, your willingness to affirm that will make the difference. And so believe that you have that potential within you to make a difference in the lives of people. And I firmly, firmly believe that if you believe that, then it's something that you can learn to cultivate. And as you do it, it will bring unbelievable joy and unbelievable strength to people, others, but it will also bring something unbelievably positive to you, because you'll go, wow, and people go, thank you. And that will change. That will begin to shift things inside and allow you the comfort to do it more.
Awesome, John. Thanks a lot. And by the way, I received that as a challenge to me today. I'm going to go out and I'm going to look at things differently. I'm going to find the gift and I'm going to breathe into it. I'm going to see the gift. I'm going to choose to see the gift. It's a choice, I think. And I'm going to become more purposeful about calling forth the destiny of others around me for the purpose of their benefit and for the benefit of communities, societies, the whole world. What would it look like if we were all calling forth the best in each other and, frankly, not calling out the worst in each other? What would our societies look like? What would our communities look like? What our families look like? What would our corporations look like? What a great conversation. Listen, as you digest this and as you activate it, again, not through just listening and thinking, but through actions that put feet on the street with this idea, do me a favor, email me at tim@theuncommodified.com, or check me out on social media, connect with me, and let John and I know how you're uncorking this uncork conversation, how you're taking the cork off this thing for the benefit of others. Take it off, let them drink. Thanks for joining us, and have an excellent day.